Who among us hasn't wondered what happens after our lives have come to their inevitable ending, and we play out our final moments in the land of the living? The concept of what happens to us after we've died has baffled scientists and philosophers the world over for almost as long as human civilization has existed. Some out there already claim to know the exact answer. You probably already know that the belief in the existence of an afterlife is one held by almost every single religion and culture around the globe. Heaven, hell, Valhalla, purgatory, limbo, Sheol, the world to come. Descriptions of the afterlife and how to get sent there often varies depending on the religion or cultural group it is linked to. But to think in more general terms, the concept usually revolves around the soul leaving the body after death and living forever in eternal paradise. That is, of course, unless you've committed any deadly sins during your lifetime. If the myths are to be believed, these normally result in you being sent down to spend eternity in damnation and endless punishment instead of paradise. Sadly, there's no way to prove if any of the various afterlives actually exist. By their very nature, these afterlives exist separate from the real physical world that we live in while we are still alive. While we're here on Earth, we can only observe what we see happening to a body after death, and what we assume or believe the afterlife might be like. After all, it's not like any deceased person can tell us what being dead is like. Well, not under the normal circumstances anyway. With no proof of the afterlife's existence, we do unfortunately get left with the bleak and existentially terrifying assumption that when we die, there is nothing waiting for us on the other side. What if there is no light at the end of the tunnel, no pearly gates, just nothing forever? But what if someone or some mysterious group of persons already knew the answer to what happened after the end of all human life? And what if the answer was so much more horrifying than we ever could have imagined? So much so that this shadowy cabal had already tried to prevent the fate awaiting all of us after we die. Be warned. We're about to delve into the unsettling tale of something known as Project Dammerung and its connection to something known as SCP-3448, as the Foundation categorizes it. It is a story about our fear of what comes next, beyond this mortal coil. This is the catalyst for the Foundation uncovering the most horrific secret in human history, a truth that should have stayed buried. Warning, we are about to unravel the beginning of the end. The end of what, you might be asking? Why, the end of death itself, of course. Any outsider looking in might think we're being a little bit overdramatic here, but we'll forgive you for that mistake. You can have that one on us. At first glance to the untrained eye and uninformed individual, SCP-3448 might just seem like little more than a magnetic resonance imaging machine. Chances are you've seen these big machines in medical dramas, or maybe you've even been placed inside one during a stay at the hospital. Using powerful magnets, an MRI machine aligns all the protons in your body. Then the machine generates a pulse of radio frequency current to create a detailed image of the inside of a patient's body. Basically, to put it in extremely oversimplified terms, it's a big camera for looking at your internal organs. Now, don't forget to smile, really show off that pancreas. It looks great at this angle. Of course, when dealing with anomalies encountered by the SCP Foundation, few things are ever really exactly as they first seem. And in that very same vein, SCP-3448 is far more than just a harmless piece of medical apparatus. Look beyond the main bulk of the MRI machine, and you'll start to notice that a few unique modifications have been made to the device. For one, the winding mass of jumper cables connecting the machine to its rudimentary upgrades, namely the same type of technology used in particle accelerators, along with a whole collection of custom circuit boards. For another, although you wouldn't know just from looking at SCP-3448, the contraption has also been through a number of anomalous rituals, seemingly combining the technological with the occult and spiritual. But the question remains, why? What is this thing for exactly? To put it simply, it's a hotline to the great beyond. SCP-3448 is a means of communication with the world of the dead themselves. Now, we might be oversimplifying things yet again there, so let's take it from the top. Project Dammerung was the name given to those who developed SCP-3448. That designation doesn't just refer to the modified MRI machine itself, but also the communication that said device was capable of after the Project Dammerung team had finished their tinkering with it. You see, nobody knows what happens to us after we die, because no one has ever been able to experience being dead in the real world and existing in the afterlife at the same time. But with SCP-3448, that problem just simply isn't an issue anymore. Still with us so far? Okay, here's how the machine actually works. A living human is placed inside, just like those ordinary MRI machines at your local hospital. However, the difference here is that the extra anomalous components of SCP-3448, the rituals, the particle acceleration, and so on, allow this person to enter a unique state of being halfway between life and death. Their bodily functions are halted, brought to a stop by the machine. However, they are still able to retain their consciousness and the awareness that this allows for. Not quite dead, but not quite alive either. Sort of an unalive state, or a half-death, if you prefer, or perhaps afterlife. Now, while a person is in this half-death, they will have entered a conceptual state of being. This is referred to as SCP-3448-A, an existence of pure consciousness while physical form, in this case the person's body, exists separately in the real world. The body, now called SCP-3448-1, no longer houses a subject's consciousness, their essence, not just their mind, but their thoughts and personality. If it helps to think of it in theological terms, you could even think of it as their soul. But while the machine's function is all very impressive and interesting, what's the actual point to it? Why spend so much time trying to create a controlled separation of consciousness from a dead body? What's Project Dammerung for? Well, that's easy. SCP-3448 is the primary tool intended to complete the sole objective of Project Dammerung, a mission to capture a dangerous cognito-hazard, namely, death itself. To be clear, when we say death, we don't mean the Grim Reaper, that skull-faced, scythe-wielding embodiment of oblivion. Chances are you can probably catch him just by going out on Halloween with a big net. But Project Dammerung's goal was to contain the actual process of death, the very concept that takes a living, conscious entity and makes it the opposite. You see, when a living subject is placed in SCP-3448 and their consciousness leaves their brain, it leaves behind some kind of anomalous electrical energy signature. As you may already know if you can remember back to high school biology class, the brain uses electrical impulses to send signals all over the body, allowing your organs to function, your limbs to move, and your muscles to contract or relax. What's strange is, this electrical activity seems to continue within the brain of someone whose consciousness has been separated from their body by SCP-3448. Studying these signals, the SCP Foundation personnel working on Project Dammerung have inferred that these are residual signals, replicating how the brain would react if the subject introduced into the half-dead SCP-3448-1 state as if they were still alive, even though they have to be dead in order to access that state in the first place. And now your brain is probably such a mess of electrical signals trying to keep up with all of that you might have actually completely missed the part where we told you that Project Dammerung is actually a Foundation-backed project. Okay, let's have a speedy recap. So far, we have an anomalously modified MRI machine capable of splitting the consciousness, or soul, of a person after rendering them clinically dead. On top of that, the Foundation themselves sanctioned the project that created this device in an effort to capture and contain death itself. But how did this come about? Who among the SCP Foundation would want to contain death so much to commission an entire project dedicated to that goal? Well, who do we all know sitting above the entire Foundation, overseeing everything, infamous for all having some anomalous form of immortality, and would stand to gain from Project Dammerung? That's right, the World Championship Death Dodgers, the O5 Council. You see, in order to more fully understand why Project Dammerung was established and why they built SCP-3448, we need to explain a little bit about a different anomaly, SCP-2718. We have another video on this channel that goes into more detail about that, but to put it in a nutshell, SCP-2718 is the horrible truth about what happens to us after we die. The O5 Council first learned of it when one of their own, O5-11, full name Roger Sheldon, died of a stroke. O5-11 was the only council member to have refused to accept any of the anomalous treatments or enhancements that prevented the other O5s from dying. However, the council chose to resurrect him. Upon his return to the land of the living, Roger Sheldon told the other overseers what he had learned about the nature of the afterlife, what lies beyond this fleeting mortal coil, waiting for us after we die. Roger had experienced firsthand that the dead actually remain conscious after their bodies have shut down all other functions. That meant that every person to have died over the course of human history, has remained aware of everything that happened to them afterward. They can feel themselves slowly decaying, their bones and skin withering, buried under the cold, wasting away into nothingness day after day. And that's SCP-2718, the painful truth that there is no paradise, no heaven, no afterlife. There is just endless, silent consciousness beyond the end of every life. This revelation is what instigated the Overseer Council, specifically O5-4, to establish Project Dammerung. It was learning the answer to what happens next that spurred the creation of SCP-3448. The intention was, by reading and interacting with those residual electrical signals in the brain, that the Foundation could create a link, a form of two-way communication between them and the living world and the subject, SCP-3448-A, in their half-dead state. Using other items and anomalous technology connected to the MRI machine, the Foundation's researchers could interpret the electrical signals in SCP-3448-A's brain as images. A Foundation agent by the name of Anthony Michaels proved to be the only test subject capable of using SCP-3448, beyond the earliest tests on animal specimens. And we know what you're thinking. The Foundation would normally use D-Class personnel for this sort of test. After all, it's a machine that renders you almost dead, stopping all bodily function. The problem was, Project Dammerung needed someone loyal to the Foundation, and D-Classes could hardly be trusted to follow orders without the threat of death. Think about it. You separate their consciousness from their body, and they don't care if you threaten to kill them. Agent Michaels served as the SCP-3448-A component, residing within the modified MRI machine, held in a state between life and death. But something went wrong. Something that would ultimately do more harm than good. The Foundation had tried in vain to contain death, and in tampering with forces well beyond their own understanding, may have accidentally done something even worse. They neutralized it. They killed death. And things only went downhill from there. Now go check out Evil Monster created by SCP Foundation SCP-2419 The Laughing Men, and SCP-006 Fountain of Youth for more SCPs that blur the line between life and death.